Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our first Professor Speaks lecture for the 2023 calendar year. I am Professor Tanisha Stevenson, Dean of the Faculties, Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. I will moderate today's session. The Professor Speaks lecture series provides us with a forum for academics at the rank of professor to share on topics of interest, whether from their academic research, their academic experience, or areas of local, regional, or international importance. The forum then provides a medium for us to engage with a general audience on science and technology. This year is particularly special for us as the University of the West Indies, as we celebrate 75 years since the establishment of our university. As the Faculty of Science and Technology, the go-to place for science, we use this session as a launch of our celebrations of this 75th year. Today's Professor Speaks, ladies and gentlemen, will explore rising to leadership, negotiating leadership challenges in STEM, and will feature Professor Lisa Dionne Morris, Professor of Public and Industrial Understanding of Capability Design in the Faculty of Engineering and Physical Sciences at the University of Leeds. Ladies and gentlemen, you will be welcome to pose your questions on Facebook Live or on the chat on uatv.org. To tell us more about Professor Morris, I invite Dr. Omar Huerta Cardoso to do the formal introductions. Doc?
Thank you very much for the invitation and the introduction. My name is Omar Huerta, and I have the pleasure to know and work with Professor Lisa Dionne Morris. And now it's an honor for me to have the chance to introduce her. Lisa Dionne is a celebrated UK Black female academic and STEM professor, and an executive career and leadership coach with expertise and essential experience in change and transformation. Lisa Dionne brings this to her executive coaching industry practice when partnering with leaders and facilitators to enable change, real change that is purposeful, meaningful, inclusive, and sustainable. Her extensive career in academic leadership, nationally and internationally, in organizational development and organizational design, spanned different sectors where she worked in a range of design strategic leadership roles. She has mentor clients at the University of Leeds and a range of organizations, including the International Baccalaureate Organization, Yorkshire Building Society Bank, and KPMG International. A fellow of the UK Higher Education Academy, Lisa Dionne has contributed to design, education and engineering publications, and strategic outputs, including strategic vision reports and business plans, where she shared her top tips on career success. Lisa Dionne has a postgraduate diploma in academic leadership and graduated with a PhD from the School of Mechanical Engineering in the Faculty of Engineering and Physical Sciences at the University of Leeds.
Thank you very much for that kind and welcome invitation. And thank you very much to Omar for the introduction to the university and to the cohort. I'm going to start my presentation today and I'm going to move, and hopefully this will be straightforward, into the presentation. Unfortunately, I do apologize. I'm unable to connect to the presentation and move the presentation. If somebody could help me with this technical issue, that would be really useful. Please let me know if you'd like me to do anything from my end. Yes, whilst we're actually waiting for the slideshow to actually move, I would take this opportunity to present who I am and my background. So I am Professor Lisa Dionne Morris. I am the Professor of Public and Industry Understanding of Capability-Driven Design. And my focus today is to present to you an overview of what it's like for a Black female professor in the UK to move from PhD to professorial and what those leadership challenges actually look like for me. So today is about make it yours. Rising specifically from PhD to professor, and what that focus would be for you as an individual navigating your way through the academic landscape. It's still, I do apologize, it says waiting for connection. I'm sorry, can I ask you just to speak a bit louder into the microphone, please? Talking about rising to leadership and negotiating those leadership challenges as the 41st Black female professor within UK higher education institutes. I'm going to talk to you about what it takes to negotiate that space, moving from PhD to professor. Next slide, please. My talk is specifically on leadership, but negotiating leadership challenges within STEM. Now, it could be any discipline, but I'm going to really focus on science, technology, engineering, and maths for the purpose of this presentation. But I would like you to put yourself in the mindset of a discipline, any discipline within academia and higher education. Also, I'd like you to really think about what it might look like for researchers also working in industry. Next slide, please. I'm a professor within the School of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Leeds. So my area of teaching interest is specifically combining engineering, design, technology, and innovation into products, system, and service design. What that looks like in practice is simple. I respond to societal needs through the design of products, systems, and services. The thing that makes what I do unique is the fact that I firstly respond to societal need. I do this through evaluations of prototype, stakeholder engagement, and also focusing specifically on technical and designability. The reason being is that focusing on technical and creative ability enables me as a researcher to actually move the agenda forward from what it looks like right now to delivering products and services and systems that respond to the state of the art. The University of Leeds is in the centre of the UK, but in the north of England. I'd say that we're probably multicultural because our student cohort is diverse and global. In terms of our teaching cohort, it looks a little bit different, specifically within the School of Mechanical Engineering, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that as I talk. We're actually quite close to London, 2 hours away, and we're in a 5 major universities, but the focus of our university is research-led, which means simply we're part of the Russell Group university set, which means that universities that are part of the Russell Group focus on research intensive. But what that means for our students is that we teach what we research and we research what we teach. So anything that I teach you, it would be based on my research. Anything that's in my teaching is delivered from my research scope. That means that you're actually getting the best of me. You're getting not just a teaching professional, but somebody that's actually at the head, leading academic research, understanding, and also working with industry as well. Next slide, please. So, the School of Mechanical Engineering, where I'm a professor, is a diverse school in terms of its student cohort. We are top 5 within the Guardian newspapers in terms of our research and teaching output. We focus predominantly on delivering outstanding teaching that's impactful with a strong research excellence. But we have units of assessment that's also about delivering design, innovation, entrepreneurial spirit, and enterprise thinking, manufacturing production knowledge, as well as engaging in what can only be described in connections with industry for the purpose of designing and implementing innovation that is next generational. Next slide, please. My specific research area is capability sensitive design. Now I'm talking specifically about the capabilities of manufacturers, stakeholders, but most importantly, it's about stakeholders as the infected person. So individuals who live and experience design in their everyday lives. My research scope and my research interest is about delivering a response to activity theory. I'm going to talk a little bit about activity theory now, but as you go through this presentation, I'm going to keep coming back to activity theory because I feel it's important for you as a researcher, as an innovator, as a thinker and a thought leader, to actually identify which theory, which academic theory is useful for you in your research and useful for you as you describe the type of leader that you want to be. So from my PhD experience, I identified myself as sitting within an understanding of activity theory. So activity theory is about understanding activities, operations of human activity and human operations. This will then lead me to consider not just people, but systems, service, design, sectors, industry, as well as research. So when I consider capability sensitive design, the hierarchy framework that I've actually established over many years is called the Me Plus capability framework. This focuses on putting the individual at the center and a framework that considers capabilities on all different levels. So I'm in Kenya and Bangladesh with graduates with disabilities. The focus of that study was using activity to understand their actions, their operations and their activities with regards to moving them from a higher education master's degree into an industry employment role, but which an industry employment role within the private sector, but one which takes into consideration their capabilities, not discriminates, not looks at them as if they are unable to contribute, but considers the holistic individual and what that person can contribute. And not only what that person can contribute, is the organisation can do in order to help with the delivery of services and systems and their value to the company. So the capability system is about the me plus. What are the scaffoldings, the interventions that's needed in order to enable me to strive in an organisation in order to deliver what's required in relation to the duties and roles and responsibilities? Now, this specific study was focused on assistive technologies and identifying the assistive technology principles and uses, costs, procedures, and also procurements, which allowed individuals with disabilities to be integrated, supported, and valued in the workplace. So activity theory is at the heart of what I do in terms of research, looking at operations, actions, as well as activities. Then looking at the ways in which different services and systems can be designed to improve the affected person's experience. If you want to read a little bit more about that, feel free to go to the Journal of International Development, where you learn about the principles themselves, the work that was conducted in country, and the stakeholders that were involved. Next slide, please. So how does that look like in terms of my research interest and what I'm known for? So remember, I'm really focused on the affected person's need, capability-driven design, understanding the lived experience first before designing product systems and services. In amongst that area, I would say that my true passion would be about responding to emerging paradigms in research, equity, diversity, and inclusion, which means that I'm looking at 3 priorities and wanting to expand on these priorities in my research area. Priority 1, in academic and industry research, I'm really wanting us and the industry that I work in to concentrate on exploitation, resolving examples within organizations of exploitation, where people are taken for granted. I celebrate the purpose and the celebrating the activities of the whole research team, whereby in the past we've not considered issues regarding discrimination, how people live in terms of their intersectionality, how to value every single role within the research team, not just the principal investigator, but everybody from the domestic technician all the way up to the technical services, professional services, everybody that is involved in the delivery of the research output. That's my first priority in research. My second priority is about focusing on neglected individuals, and this is what this study is about. Now, I would say that in terms of research, vulnerable communities incorporated into research have been neglected or taken advantage of. So my second priority is about focusing specifically on addressing the needs of pregnant women, Indigenous populations, first settlers, in terms of global health. Responding to the needs of global health is essential because if we have a healthy society, we have good industry. If we have a healthy society, we can be educated. If we have a healthy society, there is a difference to the world that can make for individuals. My third priority is specifically gathering data, working with a number of people to co-create and also to network for the purpose of opening data to share and also generate new inspiration, generate new thought, generate new data. Now, if we're going to the next slide, I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. So this is an example of where I sit. I would consider myself to be transdisciplinary researcher, which means that I enjoy and benefit from the co-production of knowledge, the co-dissemination of knowledge, and the co-production of research outputs. So this is an example of where I sit. Although I sit within design engineering, I'm happy and willing to work with all researchers all over the world. So in this project, I was specifically looking at the design and manufacture of microwave ovens, specifically smart digital appliances, looking at designing and developing smart digital appliances for the future using emerging technologies. So I had a data set from a series of studies that I had done. I met Corey and also Dorothy, and the first thing that I said to them was, what do you do? Can we collaborate? A bit awkward at first because we'd never worked together in such a collaborative space, and it wasn't really clear what we could do. But I went back to my principles and my priorities and established a better understanding. Then, you know what, the first thing we should do is I will open up data sets to you and see what happens in terms of using methodology to analyze the same qualitative data. So the data that was actually delivered at the outset was my data from a qualitative study. Then Corey, who is a medical statistician, used the data in order to analyze specifically what was going on in terms of qualitative, the number of qualitative experiences or components that were in the data. I then opened these results up to Dorothy. Dorothy is a food systems and nutritional scientist. So we're looking at qualitative data to qualitative data analysis, shifting data sets and making them more sustainable by reinterpreting, reusing in order to deliver new outputs. So most of my time is focused on these three priorities, and these three priorities drive my research interest. Next slide. In terms of who I am and what I do, this is my research scope. Because I am the 41st Black female professor within the UK, bear in mind there are 22,000 professors within the UK. There are 4,000 of those 22 professors who happen to be female. And of that 22,000, there are only 41, probably 42, 43 now, Black female professors. You can probably experience from your own understanding what that might look like, might think what it might look like to navigate through the leadership challenges, navigate from PhD to professor. But I get asked lots of seed questions, and I consider them to be seed questions because people are probably a little bit fascinated, intrigued. How did I do it? So I'm going to open up these questions to yourself as a starting point for actually explaining how I negotiated through that experience. So I'm going to introduce Omar. I'm going to ask him to ask me a few of these questions, as many as you like, and I will respond to them in a quick and sharp way in order to give you a little bit of insight into who I am and how I responded to the challenges. Omar.
Thank you, Lisa. So yeah, I would like to ask you a few questions that I believe are going to help us understand your work a bit better, and obviously the journey or your journey as one of the leading professors in this institution. So first, I would like to ask you if it is possible for you to share your journey to becoming a professor, and what are the challenges that you have faced along the way?
I would see my journey to becoming a professor as being from the start of my PhD. So I did a part-time PhD whilst working at the university and whilst working at industry. So that was the beginning. The reason why I decided to do a PhD was because I realized whilst working in industry, I wanted to become more adept, more knowledgeable about research. So to see how research could have a better impact on the design solution. So when I actually decided to do a PhD, that was my motivation. What are the challenges that I've faced? I think my own mind is my biggest challenge. The limitations that I put on myself in terms of the way I think about problems. I've learned over the years to expand my mind and to be open to outside influence. And that has helped me navigate my way through different challenges.
Thank you. And how do you approach your role as an educator, and what are your priorities as a professor? How do you find that balance?
I approach that role as in terms of cognitive apprenticeship. So every time I meet somebody, I don't come in as a leader or as somebody that's at the top of the hierarchy. I come in as an individual that's prepared to learn from other people's experience and to share my experience and learn from your experience. This has been useful because it's helped me to prioritize the needs of other people above the needs of myself. Which means that I sit in a space of gratitude for the simple fact that I can work alongside people and learn from their experiences and then learn from me at every opportunity.
Thank you. And how do you find the balance in your research, teaching, and all the responsibilities that you have as a professor?
I go back to, and you probably see it when it further along in the slides, Maya Angelou, do what you love. I actually do what I love, and there's no doubt about it. I love teaching, I love research. I can't really distinguish between which one I love the most, but I'm just doing what I love, and that's the most important thing.
And what advice would you give to students who are very interested in pursuing a career in academia?
The advice I would say, the advice I would give would be decide what you would like to achieve and what you don't want to do. I think one of the things that is really problematic is when you're starting off your career, you're prepared to do anything to get ahead. I think about look at it the other way. Decide what you don't want to do, and then everything else is on the table. So I knew when I first started that I didn't want to do pure design innovation, design engineering. I wanted to do some aspect of research. So I decided to move quite quickly into roles that will allow me to investigate. So if you have an idea of what you don't want to do, and that means that you can do other things, establish what the don'ts are first, and then move into this open area of possibilities.
Then can you speak a little bit about on the importance of diversity and inclusion in the academic community and how your work to advance these goals and how you work to advance these goals in your own work?
So I think in terms of diversity and inclusion, those things are really important. And for some academics, they don't see it as an imperative. But for me, diversity, inclusion, equity, diversity, inclusion is essential. Essential, everything from the research concept to the research design, including the contribution to knowledge and the knowledge transfer. It's really important because we are not responding to ourselves and our own selfish needs. We're responding to a diverse global need. So if we have a team that's not just diverse in terms of its thinking, but diverse in terms of its social economic background, its culture, its language, its social economic background as well, then we have a better team of people with lived in understanding of what it might look like to experience life from a specific situation or a condition.
And talking about working in teams, how do you approach mentorship and supporting and support the next generation of academics, particularly black women and other unrepresented groups?
I think one of the things that I really do lean into is the need for us to co-create and network and collaborate. I think that's the most important thing. If I know somebody that can help you and I can't help you myself, I will lean into that space. I will never be in a situation where somebody comes to me and said, I don't have time. It's really important to make space and time in order to grow that next generation, because succession planning is something that's essential for a good leadership role. You should be considering who is coming next, because ultimately, I know I'm not always going to be here. And anybody will leave a job, leave a position, leave a research appointment, and you'll find that without succession planning, everybody's at a loss, things ground to a halt. So succession planning for me is essential.
And Could you share your thoughts on current trends and challenges in your own field and what you see as the future direction for your own research?
I think I will lean into the priorities that I established in the first couple of slides. I would say that the priorities and the future would be this idea of opening data, sustainable data, for the purpose of transdisciplinary work. Because you cannot do it by yourself. I've learned quite quickly that if I write a paper, I'm working on the paper, it's exhausting. I'm writing an application for it, it's exhausting. If I'm collaborating with different people, or I'm writing with people from different disciplines, I can look at the same problem from different disciplines' perspectives, which means that there is a potential of 3 or 4 papers out of this, not just a central thought of I sit within my discipline, I only write for my discipline, my outputs are for my discipline. So I think that would be my contribution in response to that question.
I got one last question for you, Lisa Dionne. How do you navigate the challenges of being a Black woman in a leadership role in academia? And what advice would you give to others in a similar position?
Okay, and that one for me is always the biggest one. And that's the one that I actually want to focus on and actually spend the next couple of slides explaining. So next slide, please. So how do I rise to leadership? How did I rise to leadership? And how did I navigate that leadership challenges in STEM? And that was really the question, that question that always comes up. How did you do it? How did you not go under? How did you survive? How did you wade the water? How did you keep moving when all was against you? How did you find inspiration and love for the job that you do when there is such adversity? And these questions were really close to my heart, and the responses as well took a lot of thought for me to go through. So I want to share my responses to those right now. So can I ask you to go to the next slide, please? So what it looks like for me, the 41st Black female professor. I've said to you already that it was clear from the offset that you can only become truly accomplished at something that you love. So if you don't love it, if you're not invested in it, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. It may well pay the bills, but maybe you shouldn't be doing it. I've always thought to myself, okay, a strength is something that I'm good at and that motivates me. It's not a strength if it's just I'm just good at and it doesn't motivate me. It's not a strength if I'm motivated and I'm not good at it. It needs to be both these things. I need to be good at it, I need to love it, and it needs to motivate me. Therefore, it's a strength. Now, having that as a strength and what that strength looks like in terms of leadership is really quite profound. But that strength as a Black female and what that looks like in terms of your authenticity, your authority, your clarity of vision, is really hits up against some of the probably Eurocentric versions of what leadership looks like. So specifically in the UK, I kind of sourced a few articles and in order just to get a better grounding of my own thought process. And there was 2 articles that came about that argued for the consideration of race education and educational leadership and stated quite clearly, societal perceived norms is that the leader, that leadership role, that person that people look to in higher education institutes in the UK is usually Western, male, heterosexual, middle class and middle-aged. I'm none of the above. So what does that look like for me facing that on a daily basis? It's difficult, but it's not impossible. The next article I found was really focusing really on the experiences of what I would call the minority, the global majority, but the institutional minority, those Black females that have to endure encounters of bias, racism, stereotyping, okay, disconnect from their communities, a lack of a social capital, but very much mindful of the fact that they're working hard in that space in order to deliver not the best research, but the best outputs, which also means about your spirit, your the way in which you're perceived within this space, your well-being, the way in which you interact with other people. There's a lot going on there. It's not about just achieving in terms of achieving a research funding or achieving a publication in a 3 or 4 star journal. It's about actually contributing to the community and having that valued, recognised and made visible. So it has been difficult, especially with a backdrop of perceived leadership excellence. Next slide, please. I'm going to introduce you to the other Black female professors at the University of Leeds. Now, at the University of Leeds, there happens to be one Black female professor, and that happens to be me out of the whole academic cohort. Every single faculty, every single department, one. I'm hoping with the introduction of the Black Women Professors Programme, is the experience of Black female professors, that these associate professors right now, which include Kendi, which includes Jane, Amaka, Teresa, and Tazia, are working towards becoming the next generation succession planning of Black female professors. There has been a well-established narrative that is clear that in UK institutions, UK colleges, we are underrepresented because of what can be only considered of institutional racism, white privilege, or racial discrimination or racial injustice. But we're working hard in order to demonstrate that idea of what a Black female looks like as a professor. It doesn't look like the tropes of being a male, white, middle-aged professor. It looks pretty different. It's unique. It's not just to be accepted, but it's to be celebrated. Next slide, please. So as part of our process of trying to work out what areas that we face, that we're easily versed on, we can talk about this from morning till night. I think what was more important for us as a group of Black female academics, and I say Black because me personally, I refer to myself as African in diaspora. I'm talking about African in diaspora, which means that for me, as the daughter of an immigrant, so my parents, one of my parents is from Trinidad, the other one is from Grenada. I was born in the UK. I was born in Yorkshire. I was raised in Yorkshire. I have a Yorkshire accent. I have a British passport, which indeed makes me British. What it looks like to have all that intersectionality going on, but have strong West Indian, Caribbean traditions and values, but having to actually navigate through that very European space. So we identified as a team, a group of us, some of the barriers that we experienced. But what we were really looking for to feed into the university policy solutions to those barriers. So in terms of what we could do to navigate that space and what other people could do to navigate this space, we identified a few resolves to some clear barriers. One of them was increasing the inclusivity of research and actually supporting the university to address racism through anti-racism training. It was also about identifying that you as an individual, me as an individual, needs dedicated time for career development. I can't just be working. I can't just be your personal resource. I have to have capacity building time, growth time for my career. And that needs to be taken into consideration in terms of workload. From my perspective and from the university's perspective, it would really focus on identifying sponsors. Now, sponsors are really useful. Now, sponsors are not it could be part of your network or your collaborators. There's a difference between a supervisor, a line manager, a mentor, and a sponsor. A sponsor is the type of person which will speak into those spaces when you're not there, when you're absent. And I think that's probably what academics and people that are wanting to negotiate that leadership space need. Somebody who would advocate for them in their absence. Actually say, you know what, by the way, I know somebody that'd be good for that job. Or somebody, such as what I do most instances, is that if that person is not in the room, we will not speak about them because they are not here to defend themselves. So it works two ways. It means speaking into those spaces and speaking up for those spaces in your absence. It means being able to negotiate between your head of school, your line manager, to identify what development goals are needed in order to move you forward. Now, when I was around about a senior academic level, it seemed like things were just happening around me. Posts were given to people, and I didn't know, no advertisement, just people were just being awarded positions, awarded roles. And I remember going to a specific head of school at the time and saying, well, how do I get one of these roles? And his response was, actually, there's only a finite number of roles, LDM, at the university. You're just going to have to wait your turn. Couldn't believe it. As a black female, as a woman of the African diaspora with Trinidadian parents and Grenadian parents, I'm of the mindset I'm not waiting for anybody. I'll tell you that for a fact. Which meant that I had to go out back into industry because I did a part-time PhD whilst in the industry and find those leadership positions for myself. And that's how I negotiated that space. If you are not able to develop me, not willing to develop me on campus, on site, I will seek my development elsewhere. And I would say that you need to be really proactive about doing that, because ultimately you may not get satisfaction in your academic space, within your team, within your department, but you must advocate for yourself and seek that development opportunities through volunteering, through participation, community participation, through links with industry. You must find those ways to develop those leadership attributes and skills that's going to take you to the next platform. I would say the most important thing is to seek people with similar experiences, because that's going to make you understand that you're not alone, you have a sense of belonging, and you're not isolated. Next slide, please. So at the end of that process, I decided to do something proactive. I'd thought about it for a long time and I was doing it, but I'd never formalized it. So in doing that, I formalized and decided that I would set up an executive academic career and leadership coaching service, working with the majority, the global majority. So GEMS stands for Global Ethnic Majority Success. It focuses on supporting academics at every single level to navigate that space in terms of academia. Now, academia is three things. It's not just research, but it's scholarship and education, because scholarship and education go hand in hand with leadership. You can't just be great at research and not consider your scholarship or your education and development. And this is what I really time with the people that I work with focusing on, this understanding of what academia is and how to navigate that space, because you really and truly need to consider all aspects of your experience, which is research, scholarship, and education. So I work with a number of organizations, a number of universities throughout the world, personal one-on-one, focusing on the best ways to upskill the cohort in order for them to mentor, to be mentored. So mentoring people for them to becoming mentors at every stage. So we build capacity and strength for not just Black female academics, but people that are part of the global majority. Next slide, please. After doing that, I was very fortunate to be approached and decided to set up the Black Female Academics Network. And when I say academics, again, it's not just academics, but it's also professional services as well. Because we'll find lots of Black females, African diaspora, African dual heritage, are actually working within institutions, higher education institutions, but it's not just about research. We're talking about capability driven, which is about the team, the priorities of the team, The priorities of the team, it's not just the PI that should get the accolade. It's the whole team that helps to deliver the research. Everybody from finance to technical to human resources to IT, everybody should get that accolade. So we focus in terms of the Black Female Academics Network and actually giving those individuals a voice for training, a voice in order to speak into that space in terms of discrimination, to actually explain what it's like to be somebody from Yorkshire, born in the UK, but to have strong heritage from the West Indies and values from the West Indies, and actually speak back into the policies and also into the development of organizational development of the university, and also into industry and also into partnerships. So we have women from all disciplines, Black female academics, professional services from all disciplines. Nobody is excluded because we represent the research capacity of the future. Next slide, please. So, one of the things that I'd say to you is to establish quite clearly how you lead. So this is how I lead. And I say this because it's important. To have your values clearly established and laid out makes you consistent. So my values are KCAL. It is kindness, clarity, authenticity, and love. I will deliver good news, bad news, instruction, positive celebration in that same way. I will deliver it with kindness, clarity, authenticity, and love. Now, that is what makes you consistent. You can't just switch and change and have different values for different situations. It's important to have values. Now, one of the things that I say when you establish values, those are your red lines in the sand. I will always fall back on this, even when times are hard, even when the situation is challenging, even when I'm faced with anger, or I'm faced with resentment or aggression, microaggression, I'm hitting it the same way. My no means no, and my yes means yes, but you will always get it with kindness, clarity, authenticity, and love. The other thing that I'd say in terms of establishing values is quite simply, I would say to you, the disertate is something that I live by all the time. Without surrender, I will be on good terms with everybody. However, if you would like me to surrender to be your friend or to surrender to negotiate, surrender to lead, it's not going to happen. But without surrender, I will deliver my KCAL and be on good terms with everybody. Next slide, please. So what does that look like? It means that I really focus on establishing and working with diverse teams and being inclusive, really encouraging. I build strong relationships. I didn't say good relationships because relationships can change, but they're strong. Even though we may have contrasts or conflict, we are strong. We understand the same principles. We understand the same outputs. We're looking at the same vision, probably from different perspectives, but the relationship is strong. We know what we want. We all want the same thing. I've had to develop communication skills because communication is really important. What's equally as important is listening. Actually listening to what people say, taking some time to digest and think about it, reflect, consolidate your thinking without actually giving feedback. Because sometimes some people just need to experience an interaction where they're verbalizing and they don't want you to do anything with that information. So knowing when there's a call to action is really important and a part of communication. Staying current, which means that you're going to have to dip in and out of your field, go into industry, do some collaborative work, do some transfer to knowledge work, so you're staying in at the forefront of what's going on. I'd say also lead by example. Don't expect somebody to be the person that you can't be yourself. It doesn't make any sense. So lead by example. If you want to be the person that's always considered to be in control. I wouldn't advocate to always trying to be in control, but if you think that you would like to actually limit the variations in different situations, That's admirable. But don't expect somebody else that's not doing that to actually follow your lead. If you're demonstrating the fact that you're uncertain too, you're moving, you're shifting, you're not certain. So that's really important. Be consistent, lead by example. And the other thing that you're going to have to learn to do is to stay positive and be resilient. You're going to get lots of knockbacks. That's everything from a rejection from a publication, a rejection from a research grant. Somebody else is going to take your place in terms of a position. Somebody else is going to get that interaction with industry. You have to understand you're going to face adversity, but your goals should remain focused. That should not change. If you still want to get that research grant, you just change your outlook, you change your scope, and you move on to that next grant. If you want a research grant, you don't then just give it, I don't want a research grant, I'll do something else instead. No, you have to be resilient because all that adversity is only considered as character building experiences. Next slide, please. One of the things that I should have been introduced to very early in my career, but was introduced probably middle of the way through this. And every researcher likes a methodology. Okay? If you've seen it before, congratulations to you. If you haven't seen it, this is what I use in order to establish myself. Okay, so this is Sawdust Research Onion. It enables me and the people that I work with to encourage innovation, creativity. So I really should have been introduced to this many years when I was doing my PhD, but I use it in order to teach aspects of academia, research, scholarship, and also education. So in terms of research projects, this is where I frame all my interactions, especially when I'm working with interdisciplinary researchers. This research onion gives us perspective of engagement and also helps you as a researcher to identify everything from the paper focus, the research focus. It helps you to understand your focus. Now, the Saunders Research Onion says that when you're looking at a research project, a paper, whatever, what is the philosophy? Okay? What was your approach? What's your strategy? What was your choices? What's the time frame? And what are the techniques? So when I'm actually doing research or explaining a question or a research study or a research paper or a research collaboration, we use the Saunders in order to establish where we sit, our strengths are, what the research was about, whether it was initially interpretive, inductive, where we're going to use case studies, whether it's a mono study, whether it's a cross-sectional study, what kind of data collection tool. So we're clear from the offset that we have a roadmap, a research design. And when I'm speaking to my researchers, these are the things that I ask you to do. Establish yourself clearly. Don't waver, because at the end of this experience, if you're not clear about what your research onion is, you're going to become confused about what the paper is, what the research study was, what the output was. And this allows you to be creative, meet with the people and talk about the ways in which they can feed into the study. Establish what your strengths are. I'm really, really good at data collection. My focus is always going to be on case studies, but I'm really wanting to work with somebody that's strong with action research as well. Or the study is about action research, but I'm wanting to work with somebody else to establish more case studies. It gets you to really work yourself around the research space so you can actually lead on projects. And if there are any challenges, you identify at what level the challenge is. Now, using research, the Sawdust Research Onion, you can actually use the Research Onion in order to establish an onion for yourself, and I call this the Morris Onion, where you're actually looking at your leadership and negotiating leadership challenges through philosophy, approach, strategy, choice, timeline, and techniques. Next slide, please. So, in terms of the philosophy, my philosophy is pretty simple, okay? I'm really focusing on developing a growth mindset. I'm seeking opportunities for professional development and challenges of leadership. That's my philosophy. No matter what, that's what I'm doing. I'm seeking opportunities for personal development and I'm embracing opportunities. So in terms of my approach, I'm always seeking mentorship. Even as a professor, I'm seeking the insight on the leadership landscape from other professors or other researchers, other PhDs, somebody from industry. I'm always seeking a better understanding of the situation. That's really important because it allows me to understand that the job is not done yet. I'm still learning, I'm still experiencing, but I can actually support other people as well. Then I'm establishing through the strategy a clear way of communicating through different channels. So I will have meetings, regular meetings, one-on-one discussions, I'll give you feedback. But that's my strategy for leadership engagement. I'll negotiate those challenges. I'll demonstrate my leadership by having this consistent behaviour. The next one is fostering, supporting inclusive work environments, all the way down to continuous learning, and most importantly, the techniques is promoting collaboration and teamwork. I can't do it by myself. I'm always looking for collaborators. I'm always considering teamwork. I understand the importance of research EDI and the team and priority number one. Okay? Priority number one is actually we have lots of people who have been neglected in the research domain and making sure everybody's viewpoint, everybody from technicians to PAs, everybody's input into the research project is important. Next slide, please. So, when it comes to negotiating the spaces, we could really focus on the lack, okay? Especially from my perspective in the UK. Lack of representation, lack of diversity, unsupported work environments. Yes, there are biases and discrimination and the microaggressions as well. There is every example, lack of opportunity, lack of development. However, we need to really think about the solution spaces on an individual basis, which means that you as an individual have to demonstrate and lead by example, promoting diversity and inclusion in the research and research teams. Providing professional development, not just for yourself, but for others. There's great satisfaction and uplift and actually seeing how that can expand your mind to do more for yourself. Encouraging mentorship and coaching and addressing the bias and the discrimination in your own behavior and in the behavior of others at point. Not letting things slide because you know what, they're not demonstrating, they're not throwing that aggression at me. So I'm just not I'm going to keep my head down because I don't want to be bullied. You have to speak into that space because ultimately that research space is where everybody needs to, co-produce, co-populate, interact, and it has to be a safe space. So it takes one person to speak up, whereby you're demonstrating the leadership qualities that people need to actually follow. Next slide, please. So this slide was a combination. When I reflected deep and hard about where I was, what I was doing, how I moved from PhD to professor, I kind of sat down and thought, okay, what would be the top tips that I would give somebody? And most importantly, when could I ask them to demonstrate and use these skills? Remember, these top 20 tips make that holistic from PhD to professor. However, I would say, when you're doing your PhD, when you're actually in the trenches, I can only describe my experience of doing a PhD part-time over 7 years whilst working in industry as being in the trenches continuously. When I was in the trenches, I should have really sought mentorship. I should have really built and developed relationships with researchers in my institution and outside of my institution. I should have really thought about the fact that, my PhD is not just an investigation, but it's about skills development and skills knowledge. And I should have really been more visible and assertive because ultimately, at the end of the PhD, your contribution to knowledge is not just the outputs, but it's the way in which you demonstrate that you are an expert in what you know and only you know it. So that's really important. As a fellow, I should have probably fostered a supportive, inclusive environment, made more alliances, been supported, advocated for myself as well as for others, celebrated my successes a little bit more, and not wait for the big one, but celebrated the fact that, you know what, that I finished work at 5 o'clock and I wasn't working till late, that I completed a chapter, even though I've still got the whole thesis to go, and then I reviewed a funding application and got it in on time. Those things are really important to celebrate every aspect of what you do. You can't wait for the big ones, because if you wait for that big, I submitted the proposal, I handed it in, got the paper, it feels really deflated, because at that point, you're depleted. I would have really focused on my strengths. Remember, your strength is what you're good at and what motivates you, okay, and what infuses you. I would have actually developed a little bit more resilience, because things used to hurt, especially when you realize that you are operating at a level and your circumstance doesn't reflect that. So more resilience. As a lecturer, building networks, working more with industry, seeking opportunities for development inside and outside of the university, collaborating with other professionals. Professional services are amazing. They are the people that, you know, I'm going to give you this for a freebie. You should make friends with somebody in the finance office, in the funding office, one of the administrative staff, because they are the gatekeepers to all university knowledge, especially when it comes to operational management. It's about collaborating with other professionals and also getting involved in doing outreach, because ultimately it will give you satisfaction to see other people achieve. As a senior lecturer, things got hard. But you know what, at that point in time, I should have sought the sponsorship and mentoring programs which would allow me to speak my truth and lean into my leadership values. Take on leadership roles that may be not what you want, but gives you an opportunity to demonstrate who you are. Now, I'm very conscious of what my grandma used to say to me, and it's somewhere in the Bible, I know it is, that a man marries a wife and a wife marries a husband. It doesn't say anywhere that he marries somebody to make them a wife, to make them a husband. So my gift to you is that you need to be demonstrating that you are doing the role before you have the title. And when I'm looking for collaborators or people to work with, I'm looking for those people who are demonstrating those leadership qualities now without the title. Because if you're waiting for the title, you can't work out the problems, you can't work out your character, you cannot work out, you just look deficient, you look incompetent, you look out of control, because you're working out yourself in relation to a role. It's the other way around. Demonstrate that you're operating at that level, and people will then lean into and see into you. See into you, into you. Intimacy is really important. Do you see in the level of ability that I have, or you don't? If you don't see into me, I wish you well, I will just move aside. Don't worry about the people that don't see into you, because there are other people who will see into you, and that's really important. In terms of that professorship level now, I would say that it's number 20. When everything becomes a lot, when you are probably trying to research, you're making connections, you're trying to establish yourself, still wanting to get to that next level, still wanting to get promoted, still wanting to progress, is that I now feel the need to develop a positive attitude and an outlook to what's coming next. And with that in mind, I'm always looking at what next. What's that activity that's going to uplift me in order to sustain me in this arena? So with that in mind, I'm going to ask you to go on to the next slide, please. So what is next? What is next is an exciting program of activities with the University of the West Indies. So what is coming next is the Black Female Academic Network is going to lead into that Black Female Academic experience in the University of the West Indies, and you're all invited. So we're having a Black Women Professors Sisterhood in Research virtual seminar, and that's on March the 30th, where we will have Black female academics from Africa, African diaspora, dual heritage, the UK, the Caribbean, and Africa, speaking into what it's like as a Black female to experience academia. its challenges, its similarities, and the top tips on basically how did you manage it, how are you surviving, what do you need to do in order to make your lived experience better. It's going to be a time to share, but it's most important it's a safe space to explain that there's still work to be done. Next slide, please. With the University of the West Indies and also with the capable hands of Omar, we are in the process of preparing for the virtual conference on global security perspectives. Now, this conference, which is going to be a virtual conference, is going to be and have representatives from not just the University of the West Indies or the University of Leeds, but I'm also really passionate and excited about. We'll have representatives speaking into the global security perspective space from the University of Ghana, Monterey Tech in Mexico, Strathmore in Kenya, the University of the Cape Peninsula in South Africa, as well as UNESCO, and also the universities with Ethiopia, actually speaking to that space about global security. Now, global security, we said global security, we're really open to what that might like. We're talking about health, cyber security, social security, aspect security. So we're open up a space where we start to consider what does global security look like. But ultimately, it will be an opportunity for you to understand from a climate security perspective what's going on, what people's perspectives and views on that would be, with a thought to, with a purpose, with an agenda to push the realms and the scope of global security beyond the obvious, which is climate and health. Everything from water, ocean security, we're really wanting to work in what I consider to be an opportunity for transdisciplinary research, where different researchers from different disciplines can feed into the global security perspectives. So I'm hoping that a large majority, if you have time, will join us as part of this series and engage with the virtual conference. And at that point, I would like to ask the next slide. The next slide, that would be good. Given overview, ladies and gentlemen, of what it's like to be the 41st Black female professor in the University of Leeds, understanding that it takes a lot more to navigate through the leadership landscape than just being good at research. To be a professor, the key thing is not just to be world recognized or to be an expert, but your sole role and responsibility is to mentor and to deliver the next set of academics that will make a difference in terms of research, academia, and education. So I would say, in order to navigate your way through the leadership challenges, you've got to first be a leader in everything that you do. Demonstrate some of the values consistently, and most importantly, think about succession planning. Who do you need to mentor for success in order for your success to shine through? So at this point in time, I'm going to say thank you to Omar for the question, and I'm going to hand back to Professor Tanisha.
Thank you so much, Professor Lisa Dionne Morris. What an inspiration, what a talk. We enjoyed you sharing your values, the initiatives that you have undertaken to enable other Black female professors to advance. And we love to see that solutions-oriented perspective that you bring to your activities. We have a few questions for you, Prof. Lisa, that we hope you'll be able to entertain. Let's start with one. What parts of your story are most relevant for the diaspora Black female academics, for example, even at the University of the West Indies?
Oh, that's interesting. So I would say that academia, believe it or not, is full of people in diaspora, regardless of culture or so perceived race. One of the things that I would say to you, if you're away from home, so the diaspora is away from home, so you're away from community, you're away from family, you're away from that cultural uplifting. One of the things that I always encourage you to do is go home and seek spiritual healing and then come back. Because that's really important, because you need to go home, you need to engage and come back. Now, that may mean that you leave the university building, you go and spend some time with your community, you could spend some time with your family, and you come home again, come back to the university. Or that may well mean that you book a flight, you go home, you find that spiritual healing and come back again. One of the things that we are in diaspora is multifaceted, which means that we can adapt, and that's a great thing. But sometimes when you're adapting too much, you can shift your alignment, and then you can actually become out of positioning. One of the things I would encourage you to do is that it's important for you to re-engage with your community, re-engage with your culture, and bring that culture in all its authenticity into your workspace. You can't be behaving professional and European in one space and then go home and be yourself. You have to be you. It may not be stereotypically what people perceive it as being, but it is your true authentic self. I may not be what people stereotypically expect a professor within the School of Engineering to look like, be like, speak like, but that is not my problem. I am my authentic self, delivering at all cases on all levels. So, in order for me to do that, I have to go home. I have to be myself. I have to cook. I have to clean. I have to do all these things and come back into this space, because ultimately, I'm a great believer. If somebody's behaving inappropriately in the workspace, it's usually because of home. Somebody's behaving inappropriately at home, it's usually because of work, because that's where we spend our time. So we've got to get that true authentic balance across the both parameters, at home and at work, and you can't be switching and changing. You have to demonstrate your full authentic self in situ, wherever that may be. And I'm hoping that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Prof. Lisa. Beautiful. I want to just remind our viewers that they can post questions on Facebook Live or on the chat on uatv.org. Just reminding us. Prof. Lisa, another one for you. Is GEMS replicable outside of the UK? All this work that you're doing to help promote Black women professors advancing and the GEMS program, speak to us about replication possibilities outside of the UK.
Yes, it is replicable, and it's open for interpretation as well. And there's I'm not a great believer when things impactful at people that it's considered plagiarism. It is not. It's considered delivering what people need. So yes, it is. So for example, what I do in terms of the mentoring to mentor program is that I really focus on individuals that want to mentor. The aim is, if you could identify one individual that you could mentor in order for him or her or that person to go in and identify other people that they can mentor, then you've got 6 more people. Then each one of those identifies 5, then the hand stretches out. So what that includes is the fact that I don't want to hold all this knowledge. I'm the generation that's going to live till 106, but I don't want to live and work till 106. Okay, I actually want to give back, so everybody's then moving on with this knowledge and delivering for themselves. So the program, one of the programs that I run, is for individuals that want mentoring to mentor, whereby they come to the UK, they shadow me, and then there is a set of virtual experiences online when I demonstrate how to be a good mentor, how to lead by example. And then what I do is then I go and actually view them in situ. But that's been actually taken into consideration by different universities, including the University of the Western Cape, where I'm working with right now, where they're actually wanting me to be there and to run this program with them. My aim is to deliver one program. and for you as a group to actually then deliver the rest of them. I don't want to keep this to myself because it's pointless. I am one of 41, and I would like to be one of 441, 4,041. I want that to grow. There's no point. It's very lonely being a Black female professor, and the more the merrier from where I stand.
Beautiful, Prof. Lisa, beautiful. Prof, we're going to shift the conversation a little to data. You brought up data in your presentation. Somebody wants to know, how did you overcome hesitancy to sharing data? Because that must have been critical, the data sharing, for your collaborative approach.
Now, if my response to that is, how would you have felt that person was hesitant to give you the data? Then no data would have got passed. So we can all be very fearful and nobody will progress. You wouldn't have got your data. And then we're not the gatekeepers to information. If you have this idea, what you do is, you say, you can use it, reference me on the paper. I don't want to do any more work. I'm done with this data. I had enough of it. It was traumatic collecting it. It was traumatic analyze it. I'm done with it. Use it, but reference me on the paper. You just set limitations. You just we talk about clarity, being kind, being really clear, being authentic. You know what I said? I got this data, that specific data I got just before COVID hit with Corey, and I got this, it was UK data. And it was just before COVID hit, and then COVID happened, and it was just sat there. And I met Corey, and she said she's a statistician. I met Dorothy, she said she's a food. I said, you know what? Here, if you can do something with it, do it. I'm sick of it. It was painful to get it. I don't want to analyze it because it's too big and I never sorted it out properly. Corey took it. She did what she had to do. She shared it with us. Then I involved somebody else. And you know what? If it sits there as lonely data that you do nothing with, then it's pointless. If somebody uses it and they reference you, even better. If somebody steals it and understands more of it, you know what? Never give them it again. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Prof. Lisa. Well said. Have you given any thoughts to data opportunities for the Caribbean? I'm not sure how much work you have already done in the Caribbean.
I'm keen to, truthfully and honestly, and I'm looking for collaborators, so this is all exciting for me. And we are currently doing a study on person global health centered information in 4 countries within Africa, but maternal and child. I'm keen to expand those questionnaires, those workshops, etc., into the Latin America and the Caribbean. I'm also wanting to work with individuals from different disciplines who are really focused on responding to person-centered needs, whether that be everything from frameworks to policy, from cybersecurity all the way to public health, where the focus is on identifying capabilities of individuals, capabilities of systems, governments, organizations first before delivering the design agenda, basing the design agenda on that. So I'm very much open, and feel free to contact me if that's your space.
Beautiful. Prof. Lisa, just a couple more and then we wrap up. Can you tell us a little more about your industry experience? Perhaps what you may consider one of your strongest accomplishments, or the accomplishment that you may be most proud of. Industry. Tell us a little more.
Oh, that's a tricky one, because in most things you're part of a team. Yes. But I would say that's an interesting one. One of the greatest accomplishments. I used to work for a manufacturer to Aston Martin, so the underbody fuel tanks, so rotational molded fuel tanks for Aston Martin and Bentley. And I know it's not one of my greatest accomplishments, but it's where I want to be. Okay, so it's an accomplishment. So when I visited the Aston Martins, when we subcontracted to Aston Martin, I actually sat in an Aston Martin Vanquish. And whilst I was sat in that, my greatest accomplishments was the the technician drove me around in the car, and I decided that, you know what, when I get there, I will know I've got there, regardless of being a professor, when I have bought an Aston Martin Vanquish. So my greatest accomplishment would be actually designing the fuel tank, being part of the team that produced the fuel tank in a car that I was driving around to test. So I know it's not the artifact, but I think for me it was that lived experience and follow through. I'm part of this and part of that in the vehicle that's driving around. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Prof. Lisa. Prof.
You're
Lisa,
welcome.
just two other things. In engaging the relationships in the workplace, conflict resolution is where I'm headed. Can you tell us
Yeah.
how your values influence conflict resolution and any recommendations for the young academics who have to be navigating that space?
There's something tips. So sometimes it's the way you say things which make your no mean no and your yes mean yes. Okay. So I would say for me, a question sometimes as an early career researcher, this is how I felt. I'm not saying all career researchers, I'm not saying all PIs. It felt a little bit like I was a personal resource where I couldn't say no and I didn't want to say no. And I think for me, it's learning to say, I'm sorry, I'm at capacity right now. Why can't you do it? Was something that one of my mentors gave to me many, many years ago, and it's been very useful. It just cuts it dead. I'm at capacity right now. Why can't you do it? It just throws it back. I know when I've reached I'm full, do it. I don't want to do it. There'll be times when I can do it. I know, yes, and no. Take time before you say the word yes. Take time before you those words come your mouth. Because your no must mean no and your yes must mean yes. There's no you turn around and say, you know what, I wish I'd never done that. It's a waste of my time. I can't believe it. Why can't you? There's no point. You're disingenuous. You shouldn't do that. The other thing is that when people lean into your space, and you will probably understand what I mean when people lean into your space, it's really important that you set them straight. You don't let anything pass. So one of the things that I've been taught to say is, you know what, can you repeat that again, but with more detail? So people are clear. If you're going to say it again, make sure you say it with your chest, because I'm ready for you second time round. You mustn't let things slide. It's really important. So I'm at capacity. Can you not do it? Really important. Another one. Can you repeat what you said louder, but more detail? Because if you're bold enough to be racist, say it again and say it again louder. If you're bold enough to put me down, say it again and say it again louder. It gives me time to think, and it gives you time to understand that we are literally in arm's house right now. Okay? But you know what? With kindness, with clarity, with authenticity, and with love, you lay it on the table.
Thank you so much, Prof. Lisa. Any final words as we conclude this session?
I would like to say, for the people that has joined this session, thank you. For the people that have run this session, regardless of the technical issues, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share some of my experiences, and most importantly, thank you for allowing me to reflect on the detail that I shared with you in terms of the presentation. It's been cathartic. Numerous lessons actually got me to really reevaluate the reason why I came into academia, and to reflect upon my journey, the successes, the things that weren't as good, and the ways in which I navigated this space, in order to come up with these new top tips that I will use for myself to readdress all the things that actually strengthened me and gave me capacity in this space. And I will continually look at this presentation when things get hard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard Professor Lisa Dionne Morris. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining the Professor Speaks session hosted by the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, our 75th anniversary edition. We thank the UTV for hosting us this afternoon. We are the University of the West Indies. We are rooted. We are ready. We are rising. The light rising from the west. Have a beautiful evening, ladies and gentlemen.